Take back control. Stop letting algorithms decide your news. Get uncensored history and real knowledge to strengthen your mind, body, and spirit. Watch ad-free content now at ineverknewtv.com premium.
How would you
Yeah.
define Black culture, or is anyone able to define what Black culture is in America?
Man, you ask me these difficult questions because I take your question seriously. um, well, look, I mean, we start. There's always going to be a view of Black people that Black people hold themselves as fundamentally different than the white society. So the white society has a view of Black people that's always been inferior, savage, wanting for certain things, not equal to the standard of white humanity that's been established by their institutions, philosophies, renderings, etc. When we look at Black people, we see Black culture in the things that are fleeting: our music, our dance, our clothes, etc. Because we don't see those practices fundamentally linked to a land, a heritage, and a people because we're displaced. I think that harms us because it gives us the impression that everything we're doing is reactionary, that everything that we do is in conflict or resistance to something that's imposed on us. And that's not to say that there are things, it's certainly the case that some of that is that, but it's not the case that all of it is. Because when we ask that question, well, what are we reacting to? What's the material? What's the consciousness? What's in that reservoir that's going to grasp onto that materiality and change it? What made us play the guitar the way we play? What makes us play the trumpet or trombone the way we play? What makes us cook the way we, right? There are artifacts here, there are remnants here that we have that have been largely positive, but we're framed, and this is the thing that upsets me. Black culture is not framed by how Black people live it out and experience it. Black culture is framed by how the dominant group who controls the media, who controls the education opportunities, who controls what Black scholars are taught so they can exist within academia. They're that group of people tell us what Black culture is, and then
That,
we have Black people repeat,
and I
right?
just
So that's one of the things that I think makes Black culture so hard to identify. And it's
and,
something for us to not be able to adequately study.
you brought up a great point, and I think the general public's not aware of this. The attack on academia, academics, people in academics are so limited to what they can research because there are two issues with that. One is the funding, and two is the sustainability of their career.
Mhm.
You're penalized by delving in deeper topics, particularly within Black
Absolutely.
culture. So, like,
Absolutely.
how has that hurt us collectively as a people when our bright scholars can't do research in the areas that we need to shed light on certain things and
Mhm.
also help us develop?
Oh, well, I mean, you have to think that practically every branch of contemporary society has at some point been an idea that some theorist has had about how society works. Like white society didn't just wake up and say, "Oh, we're on the brink of a technological revolution," or "We founded the internet." And look, these are all products of how certain theorists thought about the connectivity or the possibility of technology or of capital resources or of even democracy. And what you have in the academy, and this is of course a generalization, right? So it doesn't mean that each and every single person operates in this way, but it does mean that there are currents, right? And I think this is well reflected within the Black studies literature. This is why I respect people like Asante, so much, is that um, there is a difference between Black people who have assimilated the worldview of white liberals as the basis of interpreting Black problems, and then Black people who have charted a different course, so to speak, about how we should study Black people, be it from an African centered perspective or a culturally relevant perspective or a sociological perspective, like someone like a W.E.B. Du Bois, who people write about all the time now, but don't really respect in terms of what he was actually saying or the why behind why we need to study Black folk as separate than the kind of histories and sociologies told about us in white social science. Even when a mentor and personal hero of mine, Derek Bell, even when Bell was writing what he wrote about white supremacy and about the interest that Black people had in desegregation, it differed fundamentally from what white people saw, right? Like Black people had wanted good schools. Black people wanted safe neighborhoods. They wanted to enjoy a world where they felt as if they can actually be it citizen, be it black, etc. White people don't understand that because that's not how they engage with black people. So if you then say, well, here are white ideas, like what we were talking about with domestic violence, or even what we think is the aspirations of the human. And if you say, well, look, human beings are always have always been interested in war, conflict, domination of one another. Well, is that the same view that black people had? I'm not saying that it's not. It could very well be the case that when we do kind of a survey of all black people throughout history, that they're just as war porn. But we've never done that. So can we make that conclusion? You see, the study of black people means creating the nuance. Black people could be that existential qualifier, which just basically means that they're an example of some human beings that don't operate in that way. But we start with the assumption that we could read black people, write black people, interpret black people as part of the same issues that white societies have. So we'll say, well, black people have the same kind of narcissistic complex that Freud said all people have. Well, why would I believe that? Why would I believe that someone who's studying people in Europe somehow dictates how black people from Africa and the United States or the Southern, in Southern segregation have to say, oh, why would I make that assumption? Right. But we're so quickly drawn to how white people have developed theory that we utilize that to describe black people. Black studies was meant to interrupt that. So when we look at the Robert Staples, the Nathan Harris, the Du Bois, the Drakes, the assumption, the E. Franklin Frazier is a great cat, right? The assumption is that you have to look into black historical material, black narrative, black history, black reality, black economics, all these different things to understand how black people think about the world so that we do not make the mistake of presuming that black people are just white people with darker skin, that there's something fundamentally different about the human anthropology, the philosophical core and origin of black people that's been picked up either through history or God knows if you're religious, put there by God. That means that they have a different view of how they want to create structures and hierarchies within a society. For us to simply say that, well, black people would do the same thing as white people is not only a postulate, it's just unproven hypothesis, but it's something that we have lots of historical evidence to say that is not the case, right? So what Black studies should be doing, right, is creating that nuance. But that's a lot of work, and it makes you extremely unpopular, right? And that's why I say that as a scholar, I could disagree with some of the things that Asante may say, even though I'm a huge fan of his work. But you have to respect it. You have to respect somebody that says, "Here's a different worldview," right? Same thing with Bell. I could disagree with something Bell says as a scholar, but you have to respect the view that he said, "Well, wow, here you have a view that said that segregation was the basis of black people's oppression when there's really white supremacy." So are we conceptualizing black people as having their own interests in their political futures, or are we only enforcing the will that white liberals have about where they're willing to place black people? You see, these are very important paradigmatic conversations that we still haven't answered as black scholars, because you have a lot of black scholars taking up the view that white liberals held in the 1960s and 70s. So when you ask the question, well, then what do black people want? Well, we have this view of bourgeois middle class black women as being a revolutionary vanguard, where middle class educated black men want to be white people or white men, where poor black people are compensating because of what they don't have. I mean, it's the whole pool, the ideas, right, that black people hold about their own people is reflective of the psychosis and pathology that white people believe black people had in the first place. That's not liberatory, and it's not scholarship, and it certainly doesn't lend itself to any kind of liberation movement, be it epistemic or political. So we have to reassess, right, the role the black academic plays within predominantly white institutions now that we've had a reformulation of what America's higher ed landscape looks like. That means that while you will have black people that are still rewarded for saying tremendously negative things about other black people, we have to start questioning whether or not that actually reflects the reality of black people as a whole. Or we can start asking, what does this tell us about the investment and enterprise of the black academic in relationship to the black community and black people? And that's not something that a lot of black academics encourage, because black academics really, as a mass, as a whole, don't interact with working class black people, much less poor black people, to share their research. Black people become more objects or entities of study and theorization rather than people that we learn from, interact with, etc.